going on, to not only heal, but also move forward. So I look forward in chatting and getting to know all of you.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm so really honored to be here in this space this evening. My name is Vivett. I'm wrapping up my 12th year as an English language arts educator in the New York City Department of Education, where the bulk of that teaching has been done with middle school students, 7th and 8th graders, in South Jamaica, New York, a school directly, one of the school to prison pipeline feeders, and that has really been the concrete focus of my work as a teacher. Teaching is a part of my activism and a part of my giving back. I consider myself to be a member of the Talented 10th, and so I see it as my duty to give back to my community and my people and the very people that poured into me, invested in me to make me who I am, and I vow to give that back. And I believe this is a space where that is also the like-minded synergy that we share. And thank you for being here.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Monet Cooper. I'm from Decatur, where is Greater Georgia. So even though I'm here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I wanted to shout out where I'm from. I am the daughter of educators, the daughter of people who believe in schooling for Black children as a form of love. And shout out all the institutions that helped to raise me. My mom is here, Felicia, I see her. She's not showing her face, but she's here. So shout out, you know, one of my first teachers, my mom, who taught me how to read and write at our kitchen table. That's my first institution. Shout out Southwest DeKalb High School in Decatur, Georgia. Go Panthers. I'm a proud alum of the University of Georgia, which has a very long and problematic history, but my history is intertwined with that space, and it's where I met so many of my friends who helped to develop my own pedagogy. Boston University, where I got my master's in African American Studies, and now at University of Michigan, where I'm pursuing my doctorate in the joint program in English and education. I'm also a former middle and high school teacher. I left after my 11th year, but I taught for the past year in the English department writing program at the University of Michigan. And I believe that education is a practice of freedom. And if it's a practice of freedom, then, you know, it's just like what Vivett was saying earlier, we lift as we climb, and we practice abolitionist teaching practices. And so what that means is it is unapologetic, it is freedom dreaming, and it is getting rid of every single privilege that hampers us as educators and hampers our students from achieving their possibility. Thank you.
Thanks, Monet.
Man, such big shoes to follow. Hi, everyone. I'm Tanisha Dixon. I use she, her pronouns. I've been a long time educator in a variety of contexts. Most recently, I have a dual role. I work as an academic advisor for an online graduate program. And I do that in tandem with a educational technology company called 2U right outside of DC. So I'm really interested in talking about the future of education, particularly in a technological context. You know, what are some of the ways that we might consider how we're, you know, upping the ante as far as technology, and where that overlap is for a lot of the communities that we are a part of that may be marginalized. So a lot of my interests in education are around access and accessibility, around affordability, right? And, you know, how do we talk about education as a continuum? So one of the ways that I've been involved with classroom culture and having worked with Meredith over the years is really thinking about education as a continuum. We talk a lot about education in these silos of K-12, higher education, early childhood, adult education, not realizing that it's a continuum. And so the work that our K-12 educators are doing is ultimately showing up in the way that our students show up for us, for those who are in higher ed. And conversely, those who are teaching, you know, our very youngest scholars at 3 and 4, you know, are bringing that baggage, you know, whatever that looks like, into the classroom in the K-12 environment. And so I've worked from students as young as 2 and 3, and I think my oldest student was 72, right? And so when you cover that wide range of ages and backgrounds and nationalities and cultures, right, there's so much to learn about yourself as an educator, but also about humanity, right? So I'm really looking forward to connecting with you all today, regardless of where you're coming from education-wise, or if you're a supporter of the work. I'm also on the chat right now, so all the messages that you're seeing is me. So if you've got a question or something that you want me to post in the chat, feel free to ping me privately if you like, or you can drop it in the main group. I'll be sharing resources that I've collected over the past few days, and feel free to share resources you've picked up along the way as well. Thanks for having me, Meredith, and I'm looking forward to chatting.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nana Niarco. I am based in Brooklyn, New York, and I teach in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan. I teach science and technology, grades 1 to 6. I am so happy to be here, to have a safe space, I call it, with other fellow Black educators and women of color. I am so grateful to have this space to share conversation and to address issues and to hopefully solve some as well. Taking that brave step of opening up the conversation based on the events, of course, that have happened this week, but also in general. And I am also a dancewear specialist. I do that on the side, mostly working with students of color who are interested in performing arts and dance. I teach literacy to students after school who are students of color, and my goals there in that space is to bring different representations of what they look like and who they are through literacy and educating them so that they can see more representation of themselves. So thank you for having me.
Thanks all. Okay, Sophia, gonna toss it to you for our first question and we'll get things going.
Awesome, thank you so much. So our first question, we're gonna be focusing on our new normal in education, obviously. So the first question to the panel, do you think we'll see permanent change in education because of COVID-19? If so, why?
I'm going to jump in and say I've already seen it in terms of the equity in education, specifically the digital divide. And also parent engagement has really increased as a result of the pandemic. Parents have become more involved in their children's education in ways that I, as their teacher, can see. I've had way more involvement with parents and connecting with them in ways that's not just merely about their child's report card grade, but more so the social emotional part of it. How are you doing? How are things going? Things that are relevant for me to understand about my student and their home and their lives that directly impact their learning. So this pandemic really has allowed for so many changes to happen. In New York City, over 300,000 iPads and Chromebooks were distributed to students over a course of weeks. And so while there was much jubilation over the fact that students received these resources, with that came the necessary next question, well, why wasn't this done before? And so parents started to become very vocal in seeing their role in their child's education, because previously there was a sense that, well, I'm sending my child to you to educate. And my pushback always was, no, we're working together to educate the same child. Your child is my child, it's ours. It's a village mentality. So those are just some of the positive things, along with the questions raised that have come out of the pandemic.
Yeah, I'll jump in after Vivett. I think that, you know, we don't have a choice but to reimagine what education looks like in the face of COVID, right? I think with any large changes, you know, and any large changes in the world, any, you know, major social ills that come up or any positive changes are going to influence the way education happens. You know, I think as a field, we aren't doing our best work if we're not evolving with the times. I think it's any field. One of the ways, you know, Vivett talked about, talked about, you know, working with parents and community members and being able to educate the child, being able to educate children and students holistically, right? It's not just the teacher's role from 8 to 3 or 9 to 4, whatever the time frame you lovely educators do your work, right? Sometimes it's after hours, right? And on weekends. You know, it's not just the teacher's job in the classroom to educate your students, right? It's the parents, it's grandparents, it takes a village. And so you know, one ways that I see education changing on all levels is the way that not only are students learning how to take advantage of technology to learn, but how parents and our families will also embrace technology. And so it's not enough for our children and students to be able to log on to, the ABC is and all those websites, right? And it's not just for our students to know how to use those things, right? Like we need to be just as adamant about keeping up in technology and, you know, not shying away from and hiding behind the, you know, you kids these days have all this new technology and I don't know it, right? We have to be vigilant in being tech savvy and being able to know, keeping up on what's happening, right? It's not enough for our children and our students to navigate it themselves. It sends a message that, you know, we are not as engaged with the way education is changing. So I definitely see us seeing an uptick in the way not only our students, but our parents and families need to be able to engage with technology. And we may be forced to a point as administrators to, you know, demand of our parents and families to have that tech savvy and that tech literacy to be able to properly engage and be supportive of our schools and communities.
Excellent. Anybody else would like to answer the question?
I don't want to answer the question, but I do want to add to it. Send your resources down here to Virginia because we don't have that. It's really amazing that y'all had that, but there's a lot of disharmony in Virginia about what to do. There are some that are doing the right thing. There are some that are just like, one doesn't have it, we're not giving it to anyone. And so it's disheartening because as much as I want to go out and I want to go raise all the money and so my kids can have this technology like everybody else, like, and have the same interactions with my kids, but in reality, there are some kids I haven't talked to since March, and it's driving me up the wall. But it's not their fault. Their parents they don't have the technology, they don't have the money, and I'm just like, okay, there's a district here that actually was going to give out the technology, but they were like, we don't have the money, so if we can't give it to one, we're not giving it to any, and they kind of just shut the school year down. As much as I agree with that, it's disheartening because we wanted to continue the school year. But then again, on the flip side of that, we couldn't. We tried and we've been trying, we're still trying, like we're still in school until next week. But again, we don't have it. And I was told in a meeting that I needed to write a letter to city council to get that technology for my kids. It's my job, but that's not my job at the same time. When we have the technology sitting in the schools collecting dust. And I have a problem with that. We have all this money, and my district is one of the ones that's one of the only urban areas in Hampton Roads that's 100% accredited. And y'all have put all these things in place to make sure of that. But then when it comes down to making sure that the kids have what they need, their packets are incomplete, or it's stuff that they're just giving them busy work. And then the parents are looking at us like, oh, well, it's not graded. We're not required to give them, they're not required to do Zoom lessons. So a lot of my parents just said, they're on summer break, forget it. And I get it. I totally get it because it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for them. But not to slight you. I'm really glad that was an awesome thing that your district, your state did. I just wish more would get on that same trajectory, because everybody doesn't have it, and it's always the education for all, but who's the all that y'all are giving it to? You know what I'm saying?
Interesting. I like this. So speaking of lack of resources for many school districts, let's jump into this next question. Focusing on the improvements on education, just hearing from Megan, correct? Hearing from Megan and other individuals on this call. To what extent do improvements to education depend on us, the educators, improving educational equity? Let's talk about educational equity. To what extent can we as educators provide improvement within education? What can we do?
I guess I can start. Hi, everybody. My name is Whitney. I'm an educator in the South Bronx. I think for me as a social studies teacher, I start with my curriculum in terms of pushing educational equity. I think I have flexibility because I'm in a charter space, one, but also because my principals were pretty flexible with me, allowing me to create my own curriculum. So for me, that was the way that I pushed social emotional learning, social justice education, and infused it into my curriculum. I think another way, which in the beginning of the year, I was told I was a town crier because I was speaking up and saying that our kids wasn't getting enough resources by my administration. Another way I think is just by using our voice. And I think sometimes, people are afraid because they're afraid they're going to be blackballed or whatever the case is. But I just think too much is at risk. So for me, I didn't care. Call me the town crier, but guess what? At the end of the day, I'm going to ensure that our kids get what they need. So for me, how I did is just by using my voice, and then one, by using my curriculum.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Nona. I'm sorry I'm a little late to the meeting, but I did hear the question. I am a special education teacher in New York City. I'm in Queens, so the teaching lady, hello, she's a fellow pedagogue because I heard her say she's in the Bronx. And I'm also the literacy coach for my school. And one way that I have done it in my school was through literacy. So as a literacy coach, I curated a diverse library. And I remember a lot of people saying why. And just to give you like the specs of my school, I would say 60% people of color, 40% people not of color. And I said, why not? The children are Black and brown. Like that's my, I wear a head wrap because I'm Black. It's part of my culture. So a lot of the things that come through as a Black female educator for me in the environment is everything else is non-people of color. Everything they learn is never about where they come from, the greatness in history, and we have to teach them about things that they have no connection to. So I try to do that through literacy because in some shape or form, when you're dealing with sometimes difficult teachers, you can get them to do things if the book is a cool looking book, if there's good illustrations. And unfortunately, I hate to say that through the administrative lens that I have to wear sometimes, because I'm like, well, I don't think the teachers will use these resources. And it's sad because a lot of times they're using outdated stuff or they're not comfortable. Like I keep telling my colleagues now, like Martin Luther King is the safe leader, civil rights leader to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about the other leaders and the other accomplishments that they have made to society. Like when I bought the Malcolm X little book, they're like, it's too long. Malcolm X, I'm not comfortable talking about him, but I'm like, he was right alongside Martin Luther King. How could you not? So I think like, if you're going to be an educator, you are the voice for the voiceless. So why wouldn't you expose them to something that they can be proud of? So, I don't want to be too militant today, but that's how I personally have, gone on this journey, as an educator.
I have, we in 4th grade in Virginia, we have to teach Virginia history, and Virginia history is controversial in itself. So there are a lot of things that they want us to teach or how they want us to teach it. And I'm just not, one of my favorite educators told me, you close your door and you do what you got to do for your kids. And that's what I did. I'm like, look, y'all, this indentured servant word, y'all can forget that. Like, that's just not what it's not what it is. And I'm not telling them in a way that it's over their head. I'm talking to them in their language so that they can understand it. And like, look, this, what you're going to learn from now on is y'all gonna have to check it, because there, I got, like she said, I got the Martin Luther King, the softer version of it, and Virginia history brings up it brings up so many open wounds, and I'm just like, oh, I'm not gonna teach that the way y'all want me to. I'm sorry. Like, I just, as a Black educator, I can't do it. I can't let my kids go out there thinking that this was all just gravy from the beginning. Like, I can't do it.
I wanted to lift up a quote that that came to me when someone was speaking, and Arundhati Roy, who is just one of my favorite authors, one of my favorite human beings, she says, you know, there is no such thing as the voiceless. There's only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. And when I think about equity in education, I think that our role is tremendous, because equity is not enough. Equity assumes that the system that we have in place is one that works, and that all we need is to give everybody the things that they need to be equal in this system, and all will be solved. So equity, no, I don't accept that. I don't accept that capitalist structures that are, I mean, I taught at a charter school. It was probably the best teaching experience I had in my life. But I also want to offer that charter schools are part of a capitalist system. They are part of a for-profit system, right? So we have a tension there of schools that are doing beautiful, wonderful work, but also schools that are part of for-profit models of education that in many ways don't put pressure on the public school system in creative ways to actually minister to the majority of students who are there. So I think we have to be working for justice as we're working for equity. We have to be working for liberation as we're working for equity. We have to be working for abolition as we're working for equity. And I think that we have to be decolonizing ourselves as Black educators as well. I think that we come with a lot of beautiful things. We come with our culture. We come with our cultural knowledge. We come with these head wraps, which I am seeing, you know, some of us rock here, like Sophia, I'm like feeling it. But we also come with the need to decolonize ourselves, the need to really think about the ways that we are complicit in colonized structures of schooling, the way that we have been schooled. We talk a lot about professionalization of teachers, which means that we are also involved in projects that professionalize students. What does that mean to be a professional, right? Like, what does that mean? And in what ways are we actually following projects of whiteness, silencing our students, thinking about students who speak out or maybe need something different in the classroom, who aren't going to sit still, like thinking about secondary ed, where we expect students to have like 5 minutes of movement in between a class change, then you have to come in and you have to sit for an hour or so and learn. Oh no, I mean, we as adults can't do that. I've been in staff meetings, we passing notes, we coming in late, we doing the absolute worst, right? And then we expect our students to do those things in classrooms. So my question is actually about not just ensuring equity in education, but how do we decolonize ourselves? How do we acknowledge the ways that we may have hurt children, right? Hurt Black children, hurt brown children who we love, right? That we love these kids. I don't think we're teaching from a place of hate or a place of tolerance. I think we embrace children, but we are also a part of structures that don't love us, and that we perpetuate those structures. Testing, right? Common Core, right? We sit in professional development that asks us to teach texts that are soul murdering our kids. And we have to figure out, how do I teach this text in a way that doesn't do this, but we still have to teach it. I'm an English teacher, English literature teacher. So, I mean, I think that's the question I want to offer. How do we also do this in prisons? How do we also do this in spaces of incarceration where we have majority Black and brown kids learning, where they are in school. It's a federal government mandate that our children have to get an education, and they're getting it in a place, they are learning in a place that doesn't love their bodies, that doesn't love their minds, that's told them this is where you belong, right? I'm thinking about queer and trans Black girls, gender non-binary Black and brown students that who are in our classrooms, but who are often invisible in our curriculums, right? So if we're not teaching books, if we're not reading books to every child, not just that child who has that gendered identity or sexual orientation, then we're also committing harm, right? So I guess the question is, like, how are we showing up to abolish systems of oppression in our schools, but also in ourselves?
Hi, everybody. My name is Tanisha Davis, educator from New Jersey. Thanks for the invite, Ms. Somerville. I think that having these conversations are a part of the crucial first step in being able to kind of tear down some of the systemic things that give way to oppression, meaning that just like you were talking about various underrepresented groups, right? So we have some really well-intentioned people thinking that they're helping, but the things that they teach or some of the messages that they spread are riddled with like implicit bias, and they really think they're doing the right thing. So I think that part of the first step is us having these conversations and then making sure that these conversations are spreading outside of our circle as well, because we have people of all backgrounds teaching students of all backgrounds, and they may not necessarily be educated themselves, yet well-intentioned and maybe doing more harm than good.
I'd like to just jump in really quickly. My name is Maura Johnson, and I'm from Georgia. I live just outside of Atlanta and teach in the metro area. And one of the things that I think has come up with this idea of silencing students and even how we're complicit in certain structures, I think that it's very easy, even when we care about these issues, to still center ourselves and what we think is right. Like, I think these are the books that we should be teaching, or I think these are the conversations that we should be having. But I think one of the most important things that we can do, whether that's in our classrooms or in schools as a whole, is to actually ask kids what's working and what's not working and what they want to see from us. Because it's missing so often. And even when you're in the space of your classroom, I think even at what I've seen at my school, when I look at the sort of differences of the distance between what I see with my kids in class and what administration seems to take away, we are privy to just hearing our kids talk about things. Sometimes stuff we really don't want to hear. But a lot of times, if you just listen, and then if you ask them, they will tell you if you give them that opportunity. And I think that in many ways, we have a responsibility to advocate to advocate for our kids on a higher level. At least also in my experience, kids are more likely to be honest with me and other teachers than they are with administration, who they position in a different way. So I think that that's a very, very important part of this, is how do we actually involve students and their experiences and their stories in our advocacy.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Oh, shoot. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Bahia. I'm an assistant principal in New Jersey. I've taught special ed, I've taught social studies, I've taught English. By far my favorite is special ed, and it was a practice that I actually got from them. So being a fairly new administrator, I stepped in my building, which I didn't have the advantage to start with them on time. I think I came in October. I surveyed my students first. I utilized my support team, so I'm lucky to have a climate and culture, a social worker, a behaviorist. With that, I allowed them, and a guidance counselor. They were responsible for certain grade levels as a K-5 school, and they surveyed the students. I wanted to hear what their concerns were, what their issues were. My school is 62% Hispanic, 1% white, and then the rest African American. And students have expressed at least my 4th and 5th grade, because I oversee 4th, 5th, and special ed, they express the implicit bias that teachers have said to them. They express that they don't feel heard. They express that when they do have activities, I don't want to say whitewash, but their activities are often what our non-Black teachers think what they want to do, per se. So I went with the survey, and I came in, which I had a struggle year because I came in kind of hard body aggressive because I'm tired of the talking. I'm tired of we've been talking for over 400 years. Like, I'm over it. And with that, we started implementing programs by the students. In turn, I hold my students accountable. 5th grade, I got a lot of mouth. Y'all on these committees as well. Let's get it together. They have to mentor 4th graders. They're on these committees as well. And then they have upcoming little sisters, so they kind of know who they'll be partnering with the next year. And in turn, we work together. As far as the teachers, I know with observations, because I work in a very union-centered district. Like, you can't whistle without some type of issue. But I'm a fighter, so I hold them accountable. Like, I've been in observations where I had a white teacher say so background story, I had a family who were robbed in the summer. They were shackled, tied up, and one of the girls, she has issues with doors being slammed and loud noises. The white teacher particularly, I guess, when they get mad, they close the door. The little girl had a meltdown. She has historically behavior issues, and this Caucasian teacher wanted me to suspend her. First of all, absolutely not. I didn't come here to suspend because that's punishment. And this is a result of us rioting in America. Blacks are always punished. So now we're lashing out. So I'm also a restorative trainer facilitator. So I held the teachers accountable because I literally make them implement restorative practices. Don't send a kid to my office for suspension. Don't even knock on my door for anything punitive until you try to hear what they're saying and hear the underlying message. Hear what they're complaining about. That particular teacher, when I held the ACEs workshop, she had 0 on her ACEs. She never experienced any trauma. So it made sense in a sense to me how punishment was her only thing. After I did another one, a resistance PLC, she kind of started coming around. And she understands that punishment is not the way for our kids. We grew up being punished. We're Black in America. We're always punished. So just getting back to it, the students, like I said, I survey, I make them be on committees. The teachers, I hold them accountable. I do not hesitate to have those difficult conversations. I do not hesitate to write them up. I don't like the punitive way, but I make it clear you're not going to say certain things to our Black students. You're not going to say certain things to our Hispanic students. And even the white students that we have, the few of them, you're still not going to talk down to them, because all of our progress and our struggles are differentiated based on our backgrounds. I work in a very poor community. Like, even with the rioting and looting, they tore the city up, and it's a small, small town. So the kids already didn't have much. They have pretty much nothing now. And then I'm grateful to have a Black boss who is amazing. She believes in me, she allows me, and she backs me up when I have these difficult conversations and when I do these things. However, I do have a Caucasian counterpart, which that's an everyday struggle. And I'm still struggling now how to deal with that, because it's that fine line of harassment if I go too far, even though I'm only holding her accountable to our struggle.
Speaking of holding each of our white counterparts or our counterparts who are not people of color accountable, how can we promote culture, heritage, and race as resources within our profession? Like, what support mechanisms do we need to place to recruit, retain, and develop a diverse workforce?
For me, that happened outside of my school. That happens in spaces like this. So for the first few years of my teaching tenure, I worked in a school that was directly about fighting the school to prison pipeline. We all were about the same mission. So we were able to curate material together, work together, and not that it was a utopia in any sense of the word, but we were all like-minded in our mission and our goals. Fast forward, the school that I currently work in is very divided along racial lines. And so finding community in that space and procuring resources in that space just doesn't happen unless I do it. So I had to take it upon myself to say, well, I can either die with dry bones in this wilderness, which that's not an option, or I can reach outside to see, well, where are the other networks of teachers in Virginia, in DC, in Jersey, wherever, because regardless of where we are all fighting a very similar fight. It's a fight nonetheless. And I think that divisiveness, that really is a structure in and of itself. We have the ability to overcome that by convening in spaces like this, by reaching out. Every conference I go to, if I find someone who's like, yeah, I like what this person's saying or teaching, can we connect? What's your handle? So, because we have to create our own safe spaces. It's not always there for us where we go into work every day. And I just wanted to go back to the last question and piggyback off of Bahia. Am I saying your name correctly? Yes. What Bahia said is really relevant in terms of you have to know how to navigate your space depending on where you are in your profession. By that, I mean, I am a teacher who has tenure. I've gone through certain loops and jumps. So when I see a new teacher who's non-tenured, I will take him or her under my wing. If there are concerns that they have, let me go say it. Because very much like what I ask my white counterparts to do a lot, like, no, you say it, because if it comes from you, it's going to get a different response than if it comes from me. I think we need to do that also in our schools for teachers who might not have the same stability that I have yet, you know? So I just wanted to jump in with that.
To actually piggyback off of what you said, Vivett, that's how you say your name, right?
Yes, it is, love.
I don't have tenure yet. I'm coming up on year 3, but I don't have a filter when it comes to education. I don't. And so, like you said, you're the person that takes that new teacher under your wing and you are that voice for them. I'm that voice for them as well, but I don't have that tenure, and it doesn't bother me that I don't have a filter. But I was told that the tact will come with as I get grounded more into the teaching profession. And I'm like, I don't see it happening, because if I don't say something, I'm not going to wait for my white counterparts to say anything, because in my mind, they don't understand our struggle. They can only see a part of it because they go back home to their little bubble, and they understand it just while they're in the building, because then when they go home, like I said, they're back in their own bubble. They have their things, but we live this. We know the trauma. We know the struggles. We understand the kids. And so I don't have that tact. So is it something that possibly I need to work on, or is it just, it is what it is?
Hello. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hi, my name is Lisa Nelson. I'm actually, and thank you, Vivett, for inviting me to this. I'm an oncology social worker in Long Island. And so I'm going to quickly touch on what Megan just asked, but I just want to quickly just throw the flip side. I think, and I'm just mastering how to use the Zoom and to ask the question. So I know that throughout the conversations, you guys have talked about how has COVID helped in education. Me not being an educator, I give you guys privilege and power, because I'm just like, it's amazing. Even having we have 2 children at home right now, and I'm so thankful that, I hate to say it, but I'm not in charge of their education. Yes, I am here as a parent and I help and do whatever, but I think that you guys definitely deserve all the credit for the work that you do. And yes, I am an educator in that sense, but not on the level that you guys are. I wanted to just bring up, like, as far as the flip side to this, because for someone like me, who I live in an area where it's, we know that Long Island is pretty segregated, and I live in an area where it's 1% of the Black children that are in schools, and our little brown kids are the few that are there. So our children don't get to really see a lot of the children that look like them, but we do seek opportunities to find a Black dentist, educators like Vivett. Our friends are Black. Like, we try definitely to make sure that our children do have those role models and friends and relationships with people in that community. And I live in Georgia, and we lived there for about 7 years, and we were in like the Peachtree City school district. And so, as you guys know, in Georgia, that's another area that's not really we don't have a lot of African-American children there also. But my point is that COVID opened up my eyes to, I usually focus on health disparities, and that's a whole other issue. But, to see that my children were kind of privileged, we're in Roslyn. I was kind of like, when I heard that people in Queens didn't have iPads and they were giving out Chromebooks, I was like, what are they talking about? Our kids have been home with iPads. Or when we lived in Atlanta, our kids had Chromebooks. Like, it just sounded totally wild to me. And I felt like that, we're using the word privilege all the time now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, why should I have this privilege of, my children having iPads and resources and gym and orchestra and all these different things? And it really opened up my eyes as a Black woman, and as my husband also, of just the disparities and equities that are in, the city schools, or if they're in Wyandanch or wherever. Like, it really opened up my eyes to that. And, it's very, very saddening. And then it just makes me feel like a bit guilty about it. Like, here I am really focusing on, healthcare and Black women in healthcare, and what can we do, and, what can we do to help our patients because of all the issues that they're going through, and that they're kind of, they're discriminated against and all of that, and putting all my focus there when all along this has been there. So this has been really a wonderful eye opener for me, and trying to figure out, because I grew up in Queens and Andrew Jackson, which was I had a horrible public school education, to say the least. And really focused on wanting to have my children to have a better education, and and that's a whole other issue of what does that look like, do they have to be in a white school district? But that's my say on that. I think, Megan, you asked, you're in Virginia, and you mentioned, should you, Vivett mentioned that you, or proposed that you kind of reach out to your white counterparts as allies. And I really think that, and I'm just seeing you, and I'm sure that you're a wonderful person. You sound like a really great, passionate teacher. I think that you should definitely look to white people or your white colleagues as allies. It's the same with me. Today I had a very rough day. I had patients. I have the trickle of Black people, probably 5 in a big hospital setting, and Black people are, our Black staff is coming in, they're crying and they're speaking to me, and I'm like, I'm going to the director who's not African American. I'm going to the medical director tomorrow. I'm going to have this conversation to find out how is he going to support his staff. But in the interim, how am I going to use, and I'm using it loosely, how I'm going to use our white leaders and colleagues in leadership roles to help to bring that agenda in. Like, yes, I know that we're not able to write Black Lives Matter, like one of the young ladies, the text today that wrote on the board that everyone can see, and they were really upset about that. And she came in, and so I really need to figure out how to make an ally, because our white counterparts don't really know, with all that's going on around us, they don't really know what to say to us either. There's a silence. They're upset, but how do we get them to help us and to be a part of the solution, as we can see here on television, about us working together? Yes, they don't know our struggle. When they go home, yes, they are going back to their bubble, as you said. However, some of our white counterparts and colleagues are really looking for ways to help and to shine light and to help be a part of that, be a part of the solution. So thank you. I'm sorry if I went on all these tangents.
I wanted to build on, oh no, Tanisha, go ahead and go.
Oh yeah, so Lisa, I definitely want to shout you out as a fellow Queens girl. I went to Springfield, and so when people hear that, they're like, "You went to Springfield, and now you do
things." And you're what? Yes.
Exactly. So I definitely know you understand that. But, I think to, your conversation about, being in the education space and, my role as an advisor, I'm an academic advisor for students that are in a MSW program. And so when I think about, students that I'm working with who are as young as, coming out of undergrad, so they're 21, 22, 23, and then you've got those who are career changing or they're older in their field, regardless of what that looks like, I, say to all of my students, whether, regardless regardless of how they identify, really being able to call them to the carpet about how they're doing their own work to be effective in the classroom, and in the classroom, in their community centers, and wherever they're going to be working in their agencies, right? And so some of our students, and even on a graduate level, who are very new to some of the concepts that we are talking about in this very room, being able to say, having to be that voice to say, if you're not doing that work for yourself and being able to unpack that for yourself, how can you be effective for that family, that child, that classroom, that fill in the blank, right? And so I say to to our white and non-Black colleagues to be able to reiterate that voice does matter at the table. We talk about having a seat at the table. We talk about being able to use our power of privilege, and voice does matter. I recognize that as I'm the only Black woman academic advisor on my team of 7. And so when I say to my students, that matters, I am one of few people who are going to be able to empathize and understand sort of what you're working through. But then, the flip side of that is having non-Black students who are saying, you're the first Black administrator, or you're the first Black supervisor, or first Black fill in the blank that I've had to open my eyes to this. My first thought is, you're 25, 26, like how have you been living this long, right? So I say all of that, the question of, diversifying our ranks, it's really, crucial this time, more than ever, for our non-Black and our white colleagues to use that power of privilege and that voice to be able to speak on behalf of those who are unheard, right? Or who are purposely being left out of the conversation or being flat out ignored. So for those of you who are taking up space here and, listening, take that to heart. Your voice matters. I know that there are times where I'm at the table where I know that what I'm saying and thinking are going to fall on deaf ears, right? But I might say to my colleagues, hey, like, you have a voice here, and I have a problem saying, you as a white person, you as a white woman, you as a straight person, whatever that looks like, you have a privilege that I may not show up in the space, and you're going to be heard, and I need you to be the mouthpiece. And so sometimes it can be as direct as saying, here's how you can be an active ally right now. I need you to say this thing. I need you to send this email. I need you to post this thing. Because, and we know that the Robin DiAngelos and the Tim Wises of the world are saying the same things that we're saying day in and day out, right? So how do we use our white and non-Black colleagues, to be allies in a way that's going to be truly effective, not just for us as Black women educators in the classroom, but overall, right? So that's my 2 cents. Lisa, thanks for starting that, Lisa.
I wanted to follow up on some things that I heard. Tanisha, I feel like you have like 90% of the things that were on my heart, so I'm not going to repeat anything. But when I think about cultural wealth, I think that oftentimes it's us as educators who are in the space. So I have maybe something to point to toward K through 12 education, and then something I've been thinking a lot about in higher ed that I think I saw somebody kind of pick back up on when they were talking about research. But we have paraprofessionals, we have lunch, cafeteria workers. Like Lisa, you mentioned that you're not an educator, but your services are so needed. Like you see students, you see even us in ways that we're not able to see our students and ourselves. I'm also thinking about like our custodial workers, that they are educators too. And oftentimes I shouldn't say oftentimes because I don't know if that's true, but I don't hear them us advocating for them I don't hear us advocating for their salaries. I don't hear us advocating for their well-being. And they are the people who open that building. They are there long before we get there, and they are there long before we leave. And so if we're talking, if I'm talking about abolition, we have to include them in it. My auntie Lois, shout out to Auntie Lois. She's a paraprofessional. She raised, 4 amazing young men, my cousins. And this is what she does in the community. And she has cultural wealth, but a lot of times it is Black teachers who do not acknowledge that cultural wealth that she brings into the space as a paraprofessional who has spent her whole life in that community. I'm not gonna shout out her age because she may not like that, but who has spent her whole life in that community. And so, I think about how can we not just honor our other educators when it's not just a birthday or an anniversary, but every single day that they are in those buildings, helping us to see children. I think the other thing that I was thinking about is something that I think, Megan, you were talking about, which is, you know, knowledges of that we have within our cultures. So as, you know, we're talking about being African American, but, you know, I'd also like to lift up, you know, Asian American teachers who are teaching Asian American students or Asian students, also lifting up, you know, our Latinx teachers who are teaching Latinx students, that, you know, as someone who doesn't have that identity, that's wealth that they are also bringing in. And how do we honor all of those ways of being in our schools? Because as Black folks, we also have colorism. Like, we talk about the talented 10th, but let's talk about those paper bag tests. Let's talk about colorism. Let's talk about how darker skinned kids are more maligned in those schools. Let's also talk about who got lifted up, right? Who was put out, like when we're talking about professionalism, who was seen as being the most professional, people with a certain grade of hair, people whose parents had a certain pedigree, who had a certain skin color. So I think we have to talk about all of those things. And if we're talking about those things, sometimes I have to download that article that Tanisha, you put up about the Beckys. But I think that some of us have Becky within us, meaning how we honor certain voices in our spaces when all of our voices matter, right? All Black voices matter. And if we don't speak a certain way, if we use a certain kind of slang, if we dress a certain way in our institutions, then people are policed and judged, and they don't have anything to say. So I think like last school year, I think it was like the 18-19 school year, these were Black principals telling parents they couldn't come to school because they were wearing hair bonnets and pajamas and flip-flops. The parent is there. We need to talk with them. Let's worry about respectability politics later. So I think that we do bring a lot of cultural wealth. And yes, I celebrate that. But I think we also have family business that we also need to attend to within our cultures that are also barring us from celebrating educators, even those who are unofficial, celebrating students who may be swinging from the chandeliers, but they have something to offer in our classes too. And I also wanted to lift up Nena's voice. We haven't heard you, sis, so I just wanted to offer, if you have anything to say, please, you know, offer.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I feel that we need to really educate ourselves, re-educate ourselves. I told my cohort of teachers the other day, as the only Black voice in that group of diversity and inclusion and just like bringing resources to the table for other educators and students, I said, I live this life. I'm educated about a lot of these things, a lot of these matters related to being Black, being a Black teacher. I know about these issues. I'm passing the baton to you guys. You guys start educating yourselves, read these books. I don't know if I have enough energy within my being to bring every single 32 years of life of experience and resource to you. I have to be 110% honest, because it's a lot. And I really appreciate them coming together with me and fighting the battle with me, but of course, carrying the weight of it because they're now aware of the situation. So it was a brave and very difficult conversation, but I am so glad that I invited them here, that we discussed it as a group, and that these matters are being brought to the forefront. So thank you guys for coming. Vera, Becky, Pam, my mom's here, my sister, Jenna, thank you for coming. And yeah, so I really appreciate this safe space, and thank you, Monet, for that word.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nana. So right now it is 6:05 p.m. So we do have to wrap up our Zoom call. But first, any final thoughts? Would anyone like to share any final thoughts? I see a wealth of resources within the group chat, which we are loving. But does anyone like to share any final thoughts before we end our program?
I want to say
I don't want to.
you
sorry,
all. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that we should do this again.
After all this discussion, part 2 will be held, definitely. I think we need more time
to spend together and to talk. And if there's a way that you all can drop your email addresses or your social media handles, we will definitely follow up.
Thank you.
Agreed, Vera. Yes.
We're definitely onto something here. We've definitely created a space here that is needed. Not that we didn't know it was needed, but to just be here and see the way we're able to share and support. I'm gonna speak for myself, is needed for me. And we need to have times to rejuvenate. We're going through a lot. And spaces like this, Sophia, just seeing the plants in your background and looking at you is rejuvenating. I'm telling you, the visual, it's helping. Who else's soul is in need of a space where you can come and talk and feel free and share? And even for those who are not sharing, I don't feel like you're just, peering in for no reason. You're here to learn. And that's what I'm talking about. So I'm not going to go off on a sermon right now because I feel it welling up in my spirit, but I am going to say part 2 through 10, 12, 20, however many times we need to be here. I am committing myself to being in this space because that's the work. You talk, this is activism. This is what it looks like. Supporting and loving one another and being there. So on that note, that's it. I'm out. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you.
Honored.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Also, we can continue this conversation on Twitter at @class_culture, #classroom_culture. So we can, obviously, the Zoom meeting's gonna end, of course, but we can always continue the conversation on Twitter, Instagram, just to let other fellow educators, Black and Brown educators in particular, know that we're gonna continue the conversation. And as soon as we get more information on part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, because we need these spaces, we need these discussions, we will let you know as soon as possible. So my name is Sophia Domaville. It's been a pleasure listening to you all. It's been a pleasure working with the other fellow educators and creating a safe space for everyone to not only vent, but talk about the next steps, resources, what can we do from our various districts. I just want to say thank you all so much. And I look forward and continue this discussion on Twitter, on Instagram. And thank you so much to Classroom Culture.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, all.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Meredith, I have just a quick question about the chat. So you all are going to take the notes from the chat and share them?
Definitely.
Okay, dope. Thanks, y'all.
You know what? I'm still learning Zoom, so I'm hoping it's safe.
Zoom saves it. Zoom saves it.
You'll get a saved copy of the chat, so I can help with that.
Blue Jeans is a little wonky, but Zoom saves it by default.
Yeah, can we get a group of emails just to get updated on things that we're doing, and we can share with each other maybe our efforts.
We got you.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, Nana. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so happy to see you.
No, you guys, this is a gift. Thank you.
Meredith, we need I don't know what Zoom platform you have, but I have one that holds up to 100 participants for as long as we need to. So.
Oh, great. No, I'm using my work one. So that's the no limits.
Good. Okay.
Bells and whistles that Zoom has.
Good.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Are we going to do a quick check-in afterwards?
Yeah, let's just stay on real quick. And then maybe somebody can walk me through how to get the chat notes. I'm so afraid of Xing out and losing it.
I was also going to say we should take a picture.
I know, we should do a screenshot or something, right?
Yeah.
How y'all do all this?
Take one too.
Oh, my mom is still on here. Mom, I'm gonna call you.
My mom just left.
Hi, Mom.
My mom is like, I'm staying.
I love it.
All right.
Ready?
Wait, are we go? There we go. I'm sorry, I look a mess, but I like stock photo. You're all awesome.
Oh wait, I missed it. Crap.
I also did a screenshot too.
Okay, cool.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I think I got it. Well, let's just do 1, 2, 3, just to be sure, because I think Vivett, you had your camera up. So I'll do it on 3. 1, 2,
I'm telling
3.
someone else someone just showed up. I didn't realize to put Eastern Standard Time. I'm like, dang, sorry.
I put it on mine.
Yeah,
I put it on mine,
as well.
but it was.
I'm like, oops. Someone's like, wait, what time was it? Okay, let me hit the